Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in 2 Samuel chapter 17, verse 24. Then David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. So David's fleeing. Absalom comes into Jerusalem, violates 10 of David's concubines in the public eye, as God had prophesied through Nathan to David about all the adversity and horrible things that are going to rise from his family because he was a man of bloodshed. Then Absalom got advice from Hushai, who is still loyal to David, and Ahithophel, who is being driven purely by the bitterness of his heart towards David. And he goes with the advice of Hushai to wait and gather people to him, instead of attacking directly and pursuing David right away. This causes Ahithophel to realize Absalom's grave mistake, that he basically had already lost the war, because Hushai's advice played upon Absalom's ego, and Ahithophel knew better, knew that this needed to be done immediately before Absalom's ego got the better of him. So as soon as he saw that his advice was not going to be taken, he went home to his own city, put his house in order, and took his own life. And with that, David is crossing the Jordan. He's crossed over by the time the morning came, and he goes on to Mahanaim. Absalom goes in pursuit after having gathered all the people to him and crosses the Jordan. Him and all the men of Israel with him. He's gathered the armies now from Dan to Beersheba. He's got this battle array. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the army of Israel instead of Joab. This Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Jithra, an Israelite, who had gone in to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So, very long-winded way of saying that it's Joab's cousin. It's another one of David's nephews. It's his cousin. It's Absalom's cousin. But of course, he's making him captain of the army over Joab because Joab is loyal to David. Joab is not leaving David's side. So he didn't stay and command the army just because the king changed. To Joab, there is no other king. It doesn't matter who the king is. He's loyal to David. A bit of a psychopath, as I mentioned before, but he's loyal to David. So here's another cousin, Amasa. He's now the lead of the army. So Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. So they're in Gilead, which seems to be a place where a lot of these armies seem to camp over the course, going through the times of the entire book of Samuel, 1st and 2nd. We see people ended up at Gilead quite a bit. Now it happened when David had come to Mahanaim that Shobi, the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the people of Ammon, Machir, the son of Amiel from Lo-debar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite from Rogelim, brought beds and basins, earthen vessels, and wheat and barley and flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds, honey, curds, sheep, and cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. So we have 3 people here listed simply because of the kindness they showed David in his flight from Absalom. But it does come up with some interesting things. Barzillai is a Gileadite. That's where Absalom's encamped at the moment. Machir, the son of Amiel from Lo-debar, that was the person, and that's where Mephibosheth was and was brought forth out of. But interestingly enough, we have this mention of Shobi, the son of Nahash from Rabbah of the people of Ammon. Now, a couple chapters ago, in I think it was chapter 8, might have been 8 or 10, because 9 was the one with Mephibosheth, that David, the king, Nahash, had died, and David sent an envoy to give his condolences to the son who had now taken the throne. And the elders of Ammon, the advisors, had said that David's just trying to search out your city. He wants to come and destroy it. So remember, they cut up the people's clothes to embarrass them and shaved off half their beards to embarrass them. And that began the war with Ammon at Rabbah. The whole war with Ammon, specifically at Rabbah, that was the battle that had begun with David going in. And then David had pulled back because of the winter. And then when fighting had restarted in the spring, he stayed back, committed the sin with Bathsheba. And then with a year later, when all that was done and Joab was nearing victory, he called David back out to complete it. Now, when he got called back out to complete it, the King James had it said that he sent the people through the brick kilns and put them to the saws. Basically as if he had massacred all of the people of Rabbah and then all of the cities for the rest of Ammon. And a lot of people will say, no, it's definitely what David did. People just don't like to think it because they don't want to see David in this evil light, even though the whole sequence of chapters through that is showing David in a negative light. So other translations, they say, people who hold to that with the old King James will say that the new King James and other newer translations try to soften that by saying that he put them to work, that he put them to tribute, that he made them working the brick kilns instead of massacring and slaughtering and genociding all these people of Ammon. Because they don't want to see that. However, here in 27, we have that one of the people that meets him is Shobi, the son of Nahash, Nahash being the title of the king, from Rabbah, the very city that he was supposedly made all the men walk through the brick kilns, of the people of Ammon. Well, why would Shobi still be alive? And mentioning that he's still from that place. If he had slaughtered them wholesale, and certainly would have slaughtered all the sons of Nahash. It's because he didn't actually kill them all. That the translation of him putting them to tribute is the correct translation. That he put them to tribute, that he put them to work, that he made them basically a slave state beneath them. He made them a tribute nation. He made them a servile nation to Israel. Not that he slaughtered them, or else this young man would not be there. Well, I say young man, I have no idea how old the man is. This man wouldn't be here to now do good to David. Remember, this is years and years later after that had happened. And they see how David had lived, probably understand the disrespect with which David was treated and the war was fought, and how it could have been worse. Because just trust me, even if he was a survivor that somehow had gotten away, he'd be like Shimei cursing David, not bringing him food and beds to help his army. But these are three people who have seen the kindness of David, that in the heat of battle, with all that had been done, David didn't wholesale slaughter the people of Ammon. That Malchir from Lo-Debar saw that he had raised up this lame young man who was living in his land and living with him to restore him in a way that nobody else would have done. Barzillai from Gilead, you see how often Gilead is helped and loyal, has been loyal and been helped by David and his army, by the Israelites. These are people who have seen the kindness of David and understand that he is the true anointed of the Lord. So they're coming to help him as opposed to the man taking the throne. Instead of sucking up to the one coming in the power, they want to show their loyalty and repay the kindness of the one who they've witnessed show kindness. Through our sin, we can push people away. Through our walk with Christ, through showing his love, as we are told so often to do in the epistles, we can pull people to us. And hopefully by pulling people to us, we can point them to God, to the Lord. John the Baptist was called by Jesus as the greatest man ever born. And all he did was pull people to him because he was set apart for God. And then point to Jesus and say, that is the Lamb of God who will take away the sins of the world. That is the man who I'm not even worthy to tie and untie his sandals. You've come to me because you see I'm set apart for God. But he is the one you want to follow, because he ultimately is the one who is good and great and worthy of your praise. But moving on to chapter 18. And David numbered the people who were with him and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. Then David sent out 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, 1/3 under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the hand of Attai. Attai? I had that right last time. The Gittite. And the king said to the people, I also will surely go out with you myself. So he split the army up into 3. Joab has his, Abishai has his, this Attai has his. Remember, he was the one that came out, and David even said, why are you coming after me? You've just recently come to this land. Stay in there, and Absalom will not do you any harm because you're new to the land. He's not going to treat you as some loyal man to me. And Attai said, no. I am loyal to you. I'm not loyal to the crown. I'm loyal to you, which is the same to be said for Joab and Abishai. I am loyal to you, not to the crown you wear, because those two were loyal to David long before he had the crown. But the people answered, you shall not go out. For if we flee away, they will not care about us, nor if half of us die, will they care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us now, for you are more help to us in the city. So he's like, I'm going to follow you in the battle. And they said, no. You don't understand. This is not a normal war. Absalom's coming for you. If we flee battle, they don't care because you're their goal. We flee, they're not going to wholesale slaughter us. They'll let us flee as long as you're not with us. And then we can regroup and reattack. You're worth more than 10,000 of us because you're the sole goal. Normally a war is about just destroying the other army, sending them completely scattered and unable to reform. And they're saying, no, not this battle. This battle is solely about you. They don't care about us. We're just in their way of getting to you. If we handed you over, they'd let us live. They don't care. You're more valuable than 10,000 men. So you'll be more valuable and more help to us in the city where we know you're safe. Then the king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood beside the gate, and all the people went out by hundreds and by thousands. Now the king had commanded Joab, Abishai, and Attai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains orders concerning Absalom. So David's saying, you know what? All right, I understand. I'm going to be a burden to you if I go, because you're going to have to be keeping an eye on me, and because you believe that they're singularly coming at me. So I'll stay in the protection of the city, but don't slaughter Absalom. Take him alive. Deal gently with him. Now everybody hears it. All the soldiers, all the captains. Deal gently with Absalom. And a complete 180 of what they just said they want to do with King David. They're saying, David, you don't understand. They wholesale want to slaughter you. You are the goal. Only your death and your slaughter on the battlefield are all these people in Absalom care about. And David says the exact opposite about Absalom. Save him. Deal gently with him. Take him prisoner. Don't kill him. Absalom's sole concern is the death of David. David's sole concern is the safety of Absalom. That is the heart of a Christian man. A man living for Christ. Christ says to pray for your enemies, to not mistreat your enemies. Absalom is David's enemy. He is after his blood. But David loves him in a way we should love those who are against us. Deal gently with them. Well, how do we deal gently with people? We pray that their heart turns to Christ. David's smart enough. He's not putting himself in harm's way. And when we have people who are against us, we don't want to put ourselves necessarily in harm's way either. If we know we will be in harm's way by doing something, yeah, sure, we want to hold back from that. We don't want to dive headlong into being injured and slaughtered and hurt. But we want to deal gently with those who hate us. We want to pray for them because we want them to live. We want them to survive. We want them to know what we know and have what we have. Life eternal in the presence of our Father. And David wants Absalom to have life in the presence of his father. He wants him to have safety. Even if he remains a prisoner, to have safety and have life. It's a beautiful concern he has for his child. Now, many of us will say it's misplaced, but it's still beautiful. Because Absalom is completely eaten by bitterness. He's completely hardened. He is given over to a reprobate state of mind. He is not turning back to David. But that doesn't stop David from loving him. And we can see the same about our enemies, about people who have put themselves in anonymity to God. Those who stand in complete hatred of God and everything he stands for. That we can harden ourselves like a Joab or an Abishai and say that person will never turn to you. He will never return to you. And God knows that. But he still doesn't stop loving that person he created so wonderfully in the womb. He doesn't stop loving that person and hoping they will come back. He knows they won't, but it doesn't end his love for them. People will take statements like, I have loved Jacob and hated Esau, to mean the colloquial way we mean hate. But that's not what it meant. It meant more of a preference. I have placed you above. Jesus says, those who do not hate mother and father for my sake. He doesn't mean to go out and hate your mother and father. He tells everybody to go honor their mother and father, to follow the law. Because he is the completion of the law. He came to fulfill it. But he means anybody that's not willing to put me above their mother and father is not worthy of me. And we're told to love our brethren most of all. To love those who are brothers and sisters in Christ most of all. But to also love those who are not. Because God loves them as well. He has offered and died for their sins as well. If only they'd unharden and turn to him. Absalom was never going to turn, but he still wanted him dealt with. He still wanted him dealt with gently because he loved them. So the people went out into the field of battle against Israel, and the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. The people of Israel were overthrown there before the servants of David, and a great slaughter of 20,000 took place there that day. Now, you will think, wait a minute, they crossed over the Jordan. Aren't they on the other side, outside of really Israel proper? Aren't they kind of over the Jordan in the woods of Ephraim? But there's some thought that, as is mentioned in other books of the Bible, that this is called this because the battles that were taking place there, not so much because it's actually in the land of Ephraim. But the people are overthrown by the servants of David. And a great slaughter of 20,000 men took place there that day. David's army is too powerful for an ill-led army of Absalom. They had the people, but David had the mighty men. They might have had the will, but they didn't have the strength. For the battle there was scattered over the face of the whole countryside, and the woods devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. Pitfalls, being tripped up. The battlefield chosen can sometimes decide the battle. Not just when somebody has the high ground, but when somebody knows more about the battlefield, or when it is advantageous to a certain style of fighting. Oftentimes when the Revolutionary War was being fought, because of the French-Indian War that was fought before it, and the colonialists, the English colonialists fighting with the Indians, learned about guerrilla warfare from the Native Americans. When the Revolutionary War was fought, British were used to fighting a certain way, normally on open battlefields. Well, the Native American trained American soldiers, or colonist soldiers, often would take to the woods, where they had the advantage, where they knew where everything was. Same thing happened in Vietnam. The U.S. Army completely overpowered the Vietnamese, but you were fighting in their jungles, in lands they knew, and was not advantageous to the way that American soldiers were used to fighting at the time versus the way the Vietnamese were used to fighting at the time. And it made what should have been an absolute destruction of a war an actual war. So here, as much bloodshed is being scattered by the sword, the battle is having people falling from donkeys, falling from horses, from people being tripped up as they're fighting by roots and then being driven through. So many people are being killed because of the landscape that they're fighting in than by the fighting itself. And that's just the harsh reality of war. War is horrendous. War is awful. And the multitudes don't always win against the skilled. You can't always just simply overpower people with a multitude when you're fighting against people who are more powerful. Then Absalom met the servants of David. Absalom rode on a mule. The mule went under the thick burrows of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught in the terebinth. So he was left hanging between heaven and earth, and the mule which was under him went on. So Absalom, which Ahithophel knew, should never have been in this battle. That's why he wanted them to go that night, so that Absalom didn't go with them. He knew Absalom's ego and lack of war expertise would lead them to destruction, which is why the second his plan wasn't taken, and that the plan of Hushai, having everyone be gathered under Absalom and Absalom leading them in the battle, was sure to lose. Now, we went through the description of Absalom. Tall, handsome, that thick hair. And now it goes under the thick burrows of a tree and he gets caught. Now, the belief, the legend is that he got caught by his hair. by the source of his vanity, he was caught, and his vanity led him to destruction. But we're not actually told that he actually got caught by his hair. He easily could have got caught by the neck. He got to been caught by two branches, and it just sandwiched between his neck. It does make sense that he got caught up in his hair in a way that made it so that he was unable to free himself, and that's why we're told how thick his hair is. But we're not actually sure how he got caught up and why he couldn't get himself untangled. We just know he did. And now here he is hanging, helpless. His vanity drove him in the battle, and the sign of his vanity, his beautiful, luxurious hair, is what is going to lead him to his death. Now a certain man saw it and told Joab and said, I just saw Absalom hanging in a terebinth tree. So a certain soldier's going, hey, I just saw Absalom. He's caught. Because he's thinking what David had said. David said, deal gently with him. He's saying, Absalom's over there hanging in that tree. We can take him prisoner now. So Joab said to the man who told him, you just saw him? Why did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. So Joab's saying, why did you saw him? Like, why didn't you kill him? You should be telling me, hey, Absalom's over there dead in that terebinth tree. But the man said to Joab, though I were to receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king commanded you, Abishai, and Ittai, saying, beware lest anyone touch the young man Absalom. So he's going, look, no. I was there when the king David said not to touch his son. Like, you're giving me 1,000 shekels. I still wouldn't have done it. Otherwise, I would have dealt falsely against my own life, for there's nothing hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. So he's going, Joab, you yourself would have ratted me out if I came to you and told you I slayed Absalom. Like, your gold wouldn't have done anything, because I'd have forfeited my own life. You're saying, hey, why didn't you kill him? If I had come here and told you I killed him, you'd have killed me. This guy might have been around so long that he was with David's mighty men back when the Amalekite boy, or the young Amalekite man, said, I killed Saul. And David said, well, then you're going to die. Because why would you reach out your hand against the Lord's anointed? So he's saying, no, we've seen this before. I've seen this movie. No. I'm just going to tell you where he is. You can deal with that yourself. Then Joab said, I cannot linger with you. He doesn't even argue with him. He's not even going like, no, that's not true. I wouldn't have ratted you out and slayed you with my own blade if King David said it. He's going, I cannot linger with you. And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. So he just comes up and just thrusts 3 spears through him. And that's not it. Then 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. So his basic private guard came over and struck him and slaughtered him while he was still up in the tree. So they made sure Absalom has no chance of surviving this. He is done. He was not going to leave Absalom alive. Period. So Joab blew the trumpet for the people. Blew the trumpet. And the people, hold on, let me put that up. And the people returned from pursuing Israel. So all the rest, basically what they were saying to David, look, if we flee, no one's going to care. They're after you and you only. The same thing was in the reverse, is actually what happened. They slaughtered Absalom. Joab blows the trumpet, and they're not pursuing their fellow countrymen to slaughter them. They let them go. For Joab held back the people. And they took Absalom and cast him into a large pit in the woods. And they laid a very large heap of stones over him. Then all Israel fled, everyone to his tent. So Joab's not looking to slaughter his fellow countrymen. And they were only fighting to install Absalom on the throne. With Absalom dead, there's no more reason for them to fight. So they flee, and the war's over. As quick as it started. A great slaughter, a lot of bloodshed, because civil war always leads to much bloodshed. But it ended when Absalom had died. But no real burying place. Not going to be a martyr. Just going to throw him in a pit. Throw him in a pit, pile some stones over him, and one day everyone will forget where that pit even was. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up a pillar for himself, which is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He called the pillar after his own name, and to this day it is called Absalom's monument. Now, we know he had sons. We already read about that. But somewhere between his coming back from exile to this moment, over the course of his life, his sons must have died. And now he's got no son to remember him. So he sets up a pillar for himself as a remembrance of him, because he had no son to carry on his lineage. We don't know. They might have died when he was still in exile. They might have died in the 2 years after he had come back from exile. And he might have set this up on his way to Hebron. We don't know when he set it up, but in his lifetime, he had set this up after his sons had died. And said, I got no one. But the anger he had for David. That is the sole thing he had in life. That is the sole thing he held on to, is that anger and hatred he had for his father. That bitterness he held on to. That was the sole thing carrying him through life. And it's a sad indictment. And it's an interesting thing because he built for himself a monument to himself during the course of his life. And Joab refused to have a monument to his death. Just buried in a pit. Nothing more. A traitor. A rapist himself, which is what started this whole thing. And a murderer. That is what he was. So he's thrown into an unmarked grave, and the only monument to his existence was something he himself had to build, because there was no one else that was going to do it for him. So we live in sin and destruction, and we alienate everyone. We have no one at all. No one at all to build a monument for us. No one to remember us for anything good. As I said, reputation is what people remember. Character is what God remembers. And God knows of you. So the question begins to become, how do you want to be remembered? David, murderer. David, adulterer. David falls and fails and backslides time after time after time after time. And we remember all that. He left himself a legacy as the sweet psalmist of Israel. But how did God know him? As a man after his own heart. Absalom had many choices to make in life. Many choices. How did he choose to be remembered? He lost his sons. He was still young. He could have had more sons. He had daughters, one named after his sister he loved. But much like we talked about with Ahithophel, he allowed bitterness to control his life. He allowed bitterness to control everything he did. He allowed it to eat up himself. He allowed that to take root. I think it was Martin Luther who said, about evil thoughts and about that kind of bitterness that goes in your life. You can't stop the birds from flying overhead. You can't stop evil thoughts from going through your mind, but you can stop them from nesting in your hair. Absalom had the bitterness in himself for what happened. He didn't have to allow it to take root. He didn't have to allow it to fester and grow. He could have confronted his father then. Even when Amnon was still alive, he spent 2 years not saying anything, not confronting his father, not confronting his brother. But he didn't. He allowed it to fester and grow with day after day, year after year, until it consumed the entirety of his life. David sinned greatly. David did a lot of things that we wouldn't be proud of, and he probably wasn't proud of. But he didn't allow them to fester inside of himself. He could have lost his son. When his son died, he could have allowed that to fester. He could have allowed that bitterness to take root and cause it to be an issue between him and God. But he didn't. He glorified the Lord. He sought the Lord. He cared about how he was being remembered by God. And because he cared how he was remembered by God, that shone a light to those around him and would have them also remember him in a good way as well. So do you want to be a David? Do you want to be a Saul? Do you want to be an Absalom? How do you want to be remembered? And who do you want to be remembered by? Do you want to be remembered as a rich man who did a bunch of good things? By people? By reputation? But remembered as a miserable sinner by God? Or do you want to be remembered as someone who sought after God, who sought to be a man after God's own heart? I had this conversation with my kids. You're doing things. You're sinning. Now they're doing little kid things. But how do you want to be remembered? Do you want to be remembered as a liar? Do you want to be remembered as being defiant? Do you want to be remembered as being nasty, being mean, being a bully? Because I have memories of you in some of the sweetest situations, caring for people in a way most children never would. And that's why a lot of people remember my children. But you know who remembers you like that more than any of us on the horizontal do? The Lord. So how do you want to be remembered? Because it's not important how I remember you. Because I'm going to die. And my influence on this world, as non-existent as it is, will be gone and no one will remember me. I have faith in Christ. I'll be in heaven. But here, my influence will be gone. So you don't want to do it for me to remember. You want to do it for him to remember. Because he's the ultimate arbiter. He is sovereign over all. And he loves you as a father even more than I ever could as your biological father. Your Holy Father loves you so much more. So work to be remembered by him. Doing the good work he has set before you. being a light and salt for his name and for his glory. Because as Paul said, we have forgiveness of sins, even the sins we've yet to do. But we don't want to be remembered by them. We want to be remembered for the glory that we've done in his name. Absalom chose to be remembered for his bitterness, to be remembered as a murderer, a rapist, and a traitor. He had a choice, just as we all do. He chose poorly. He chose to allow bitterness to take root instead of the love of the Lord to take root. We have our own choice to make. I hope we choose correctly, because there's a lot on the line, and there is the love of the one who's going to remember us forever on the line. The one who calls us children and calls us to him. That's the one I want to be remembered by. So that's the one whose spirit I want to take root. Not fleshliness, not bitterness, but holiness and his righteousness. But that's where we shall end it for this morning. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you back again next time. But until then, be blessed.